My name is Andrew Miller, and I'm 32 years old. Today, I run a successful business, but it wasn't always this way. Growing up, I was the kid who never seemed to be enough for my parents. They only had eyes for my older sister, Rachel. She was everything to them, and I was just the kid who didn't measure up. From a young age, I'd watch them cheer Rachel on, telling her how smart and amazing she was. Rachel got all the attention, praise, and even small rewards. I'd be lucky to get a pat on the back or, more often, a reminder that I should try to be more like her. One memory still stings. I spent weeks practicing for a school talent show. I was set to play the piano, hoping to make my parents proud. But when the night came, they didn't even show up. They were at Rachel's basketball game. Later, my mom said, "Andrew, Rachel needs us there. She's the real talent in the family." That night, I felt like I was completely alone. I promised myself I'd make something of myself one day, with or without their approval. As I got older, it only got worse. My parents kept telling me I wasn't serious or focused enough. They'd say I should be more like Rachel, who got a full college scholarship and had a bright future ahead. Then, one day, everything changed. I was 18, and my parents finally said the words I had always feared. "Andrew, you're just not going anywhere. We can't keep supporting someone who isn't even trying." With that, they kicked me out. I had no money, no plan, and nowhere to go. I was completely on my own. Standing on the front porch, looking back at the house I had called home, I made a promise to myself. I was going to prove them wrong. I was going to become someone they'd regret ignoring. With only a small bag of clothes and a few dollars, I left home that night, feeling more alone than ever. I didn't know where to go, but I had a fire inside me, a need to prove myself, even if my own family didn't see my worth. The first few weeks were rough. I slept on park benches and looked for any work to earn a few dollars for food. I went door to door, asking if anyone needed their lawn mowed or groceries carried. Anything to get by. The small jobs people offered reminded me that there were still people who believed in giving others a chance. Eventually, I got a steady job washing dishes at a small diner. It wasn't glamorous, and it barely paid enough to live on, but it was a start. Working those long hours gave me time to think and dream about a better life. I knew I couldn't stay at that diner forever, but it taught me that I could survive on my own. I saved every penny I could, eating cheap meals and spending almost nothing. Slowly, my savings grew. I was determined to get an education and learn skills to improve my life. One day, I met a man named Mr. Jacobs at the diner. He was a regular, always stopping by for coffee and reading the newspaper. We started chatting, and he got curious about my story. I didn't tell him everything, but he knew I was trying to make something of myself. Mr. Jacobs was kind enough to offer advice on applying for a scholarship at the local community college. He even wrote a recommendation letter for me, and I'll always be grateful for that. With Mr. Jacobs' help and my determination, I got accepted into the community college's business program. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was on the right path. I worked hard in school, studying late into the night to keep my grades up. I didn't just want to get by. I wanted to succeed and build something of my own. I saved every penny I could, eating cheap food and barely spending anything. Slowly, my savings started to grow. I was determined to get an education and learn the skills to change my life. One day, I met a man named Mr. Jacobs at the diner. He was a regular customer, always stopping in for coffee and reading his newspaper. We got to talking, and he became curious about my story. I didn't share everything, but he knew I was trying to make something of myself. Mr. Jacobs was kind and offered me advice on how to apply for a scholarship at a local community college. He even wrote me a recommendation letter, which I'll always be grateful for. With Mr. Jacobs' help and my determination, I got accepted into the community college's business program. For the first time, I felt like I was on the right path. I worked hard, studying late into the night to keep my grades up. I wasn't just trying to get by. I wanted to succeed and build something of my own. As time went on, I worked my way up. From that dishwashing job, I moved to an entry-level position at a local company where I could put my new skills to use. Slowly but surely, I moved up, gaining experience and respect along the way. Each promotion and each new responsibility reminded me that I could do it, that I was strong and capable, no matter what my parents had made me believe. By my late 20s, I was a successful manager at a growing company. I had saved enough to start my own business, something I dreamed about since that cold night when my family kicked me out. When I finally launched my company, I poured in everything I had, knowledge, hard work, and determination, to make it a success. It wasn't easy. There were so many nights I wondered if I could really do it. But every time I doubted myself, I thought about how my parents had looked at me, the disappointment in their eyes. I had something to prove, not just to them, but to myself. And I wasn't going to stop until I reached the top. And then, one day, it happened. The local newspaper wrote a story about me and my business. They called me a self-made success and a true inspiration. I never thought I'd see my face on the front page. But there I was, holding the newspaper in my hands, looking at the headline with a pride I'd never felt before. That day, everything changed. I knew it wouldn't be long before my parents found out. A few weeks later, I got an unexpected call. It was my mom. Hearing her voice after so many years felt strange, almost unreal. For a moment, I thought she might have dialed the wrong number. But then she spoke, her voice filled with surprise and hesitation. "Andrew, is that really you?" she asked, sounding like she was talking to a stranger. "Yes, Mom. It's me," I said, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. There was an awkward pause before she spoke again, trying to sound casual. We saw your picture in the paper. Your dad and I, we're so proud of what you've accomplished." Proud? That word hit me hard. For years, I'd wanted to hear that from them, but now it felt empty. I knew they hadn't been proud when I was struggling on my own. They weren't proud when they kicked me out and called me useless. Now, they only cared because I was someone they could show off. "I'm surprised you care," I replied, unable to keep the bitterness out of my voice. "Last time we spoke, you said I wasn't worth your support." She hesitated, and I heard a crack in her voice. "Andrew, we didn't mean to be so harsh. We were just trying to push you to be better, you know." "Is that what you call it?" I asked, my frustration boiling over. "You pushed me away. You told me I wasn't enough, and then you turned your backs on me." There was silence on the other end. For the first time, I felt like my words had reached her, that maybe she understood the pain I'd carried all these years. Then, in a small voice, she said, "Andrew, please. Your father isn't well. We could really use some help. We've fallen on hard times." Of course, this wasn't an apology. They hadn't come back because they missed me or because they were sorry. They needed something, just like always. I felt a surge of anger and hurt but tried to stay calm. "So now that I'm successful, you want my help? After you threw me out like I was nothing?" "Andrew, please," she pleaded. "We made mistakes, but we're still family. Your father and I need you." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of all those years of pain and rejection. This was the moment I dreamed of, the moment to finally make them feel the regret they deserved. But as I held the phone, I felt something else. I felt peace, a calmness that came from knowing I didn't need their approval, their love, or their validation. I had built my life without them, and I was strong on my own. "I'm sorry, Mom," I said, keeping my voice calm. "I can't help you. I hope the best for you both, but I've moved on. I've built a life that doesn't depend on you anymore." There was silence on the other end, and for a second, I thought she might try to argue or guilt me into changing my mind. But instead, she just whispered, "I understand. Goodbye, Andrew." And with that, I hung up. I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. I knew that this, in a way, was the end of my relationship with my family. But it also marked the beginning of a new chapter, one where I was truly free from their rejection and judgment. As I looked out the window of my office, watching the city lights below, I felt a pride and peace I'd never known. I had finally proven myself, not to them, but to myself. I'd overcome the odds, built a life of success, and found my own worth. From that moment on, I knew I would never need anyone's approval but my own. After that call, I felt lighter, like a burden I'd carried for years had finally lifted. For so long, I'd been haunted by the need to prove myself to my parents, to show them that I was worthy of their love and respect. But now I realized I didn't need their approval. My success, my happiness, it was all mine, built by my own hard work. I had given myself the life they'd never believed I could achieve. In the weeks that followed, I poured even more energy into my business. I expanded my company, took on new projects, and even hired a few young people who reminded me of myself. Kids who needed a chance, who needed someone to believe in them. I was determined to be the support for them that I'd never had, to give them the encouragement I always wished for. One afternoon, while I was reviewing some proposals, my assistant knocked and stepped in. "Mr. Miller, someone's here to see you," she said, looking a bit uncertain. "Who is it?" I asked, looking up from my desk. "It's your sister," she replied, her tone careful. "She says it's important." I hadn't spoken to Rachel in years. After I left home, we went our separate ways, and I rarely thought about her. But something in me was curious, so I nodded and asked my assistant to let her in. Rachel walked in, looking nervous and out of place in my office. She had always been the confident, favored one, but now she seemed almost timid. I couldn't help but wonder what had brought her here. "Andrew," she began, giving me a small, strained smile. "It's been a while." "Yes, it has," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "What brings you here?" She hesitated, looking down at her hands, then back at me. "I know you spoke to Mom. She told me what you said." I waited, sensing there was more to her visit than just checking in. "Andrew," she continued, her voice a bit shaky, "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. I didn't realize how hard things were for you growing up. I was so wrapped up in being the golden child that I didn't see how much it was hurting you." Her words caught me off guard. I had never expected an apology from Rachel. For as long as I could remember, she had been the perfect daughter in my parents' eyes, and I had always been left in her shadow. But here she was, admitting the things I'd felt all those years but never heard from anyone in my family. "Thank you," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I appreciate that." She took a deep breath, looking relieved that I hadn't dismissed her. "I know we can't go back and change the past, but maybe we could try to rebuild things just between us. I don't expect you to forgive Mom and Dad, but I'd like a chance to be part of your life again." I was silent for a moment, thinking over her words. I had spent years moving past the pain and building a new life without my family. But seeing Rachel there, looking vulnerable, I felt something shift. Maybe forgiveness didn't mean forgetting or excusing what had happened. Maybe it was a way to completely free myself from the anger I'd carried for so long. "I think we could try that," I said finally, offering her a small smile. "But it's going to take time. I need to know that things are different now." She nodded, relief flooding her face. "I understand, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes." We spent the next hour catching up. She told me about her life, her own struggles and successes, and even admitted that being the favored child hadn't always been as perfect as it had seemed. For the first time, I felt like we were equals, just two people trying to find peace with the past and hope for the future. As she left my office that day, I realized that I was finally free. Free from the weight of my family's judgment. Free from the bitterness that had lingered for years. I had found success, happiness, and even a chance at healing the scars of my childhood. And I knew that, no matter what happened next, I had built a life on my own terms. A life that was strong, resilient, and filled with possibilities.